And we're live.
Alright guys, we'll be talking about regionals meta a little bit today. We probably won't be going in as in-depth as previous overall meta discussions just because there's either very little to talk about or way too much. And it's almost best to review the specific teams since we got several submissions. We'll be focusing more of our time on those. You might notice I have a little bit of a cold, just getting through it. Hopefully it's not unbearable. So we'll be talking mostly about the Sylph Road subreddit post that we submitted, or Sylph Arena post that we submitted. Polymers Up submitted it a few days ago. It's titled Regional Meta Simplified courtesy of Ghost Stadium. So I guess I'll leave it to Polly to start us off. Probably talking about the central meta, and let's see where that gets us.
Well, I just want to jump in real quick first and just say that the regional meta does seem to be much more complicated than any of the other cut metas we've done so far, which is part of the reason why we didn't come up with a graphic, because there's just so many nuanced relationships and like multiple viable move sets that can flip matchups and stuff that it's just kind of pretty complex, which makes it interesting but sometimes harder to get that same level of analysis.
Yeah, so going off of that, I mean, regionals is it's much more like freestyle with a twist. It's much more diverse than say like any of the cup metas that we've seen. There are definitely some like major threats that you see that appear in freestyle that you see also here in regionals, like Metacham, Azumarill, Bastiodon, Skarmory, Melmetal, and but there are some little nuances because a lot of the psychics that we see regularly in freestyle aren't present within the regional meta because psychic wasn't a type within the first four Sylph Cups. So a lot of those aren't eligible unless they have a secondary typing that allowed them to be eligible for one of the Sylph Cups, the first four Sylph Cups. So I've already listed a few of the big names. Also, I'll throw in Venusaur as the top grass option, it looks like. Ivysaur, that's with Frenzy Plant Legacy. Ivysaur is like a really good substitute though as well. Tropius doesn't look as good here just because it loses to Bastiodon and loses the mirror or the grass mirror to Venusaur and Ivysaur unless it's running Air Slash, which might be an option. Although if you sim against the Mud Boys, that gets a little tricky because it's not quite as hard of a win against the Mud Boys, and you're more susceptible to shield bait with Whiscash.
Yeah, because Whiscash can live a lot longer and get off like more fast moves to try to land a Blizzard. And then even your Quagsire matchup gets dicier because it has that super effective Stone Edge.
Right, exactly. And so another option for grass coverage that people are looking at is Gallade. Gallade is pretty interesting with its moveset. It covers a lot, but it's a little tricky to use. You definitely have to get a lot of experience with it, but it can beat a lot of the meta matchups. So that's a really strong anti-meta candidate. You also have some.
While we're on Gallade, I'd rather just kind of talk about it while we've already brought it up. So sure. Gallade's pretty interesting with its moveset because it has Confusion, and it has a really high attack stat, which means it's able to feint both Toxicroak and Haunter after 3 Confusions, and it feints a Venusaur after 5 Confusions. So it fills that role because, like we were talking about, there's not many Psychic types in this meta, which has kind of allowed the Poison types to shine a little bit more. But then Gallade proves a check on those with Confusion. And then it also has Leaf Blade, which it gets pretty quickly and allows it to beat the Mud Boys. And in certain shield scenarios, it also beats Azumarill in Lantern with that Leaf Blade. And then it also has close combat, which allows it to beat Bastiodon. So it has a pretty good general meta coverage. And on top of that, the combination of Confusion with the Leaf Blade with its psychic typing allows it to beat Medicham in the 0 and 1 shield scenarios. So it has, like I said, it has some pretty good coverage against a lot of the main meta threats. And it's seen some big success. I know a lot of you have already heard how Valor Ash used it as he swept his regionals. But like Paulie was saying, the big thing is you need a lot of practice with it, and you also need to run a lot of sims on it because you need to be familiar with the matchups. Because while it can beat a lot of those meta threats, it doesn't beat all of them in all even shield scenarios. Like, it loses to Venusaur shields down, and it loses to Medicham in the 2 shield, and there's like a handful of other scenarios that I don't remember all of them right now because they're just so varied and nuanced. So if you're running it, you definitely want to make sure you know all those matchups very well. And I guess if you're expecting to come against one, then you probably want to know those matchups too.
And while we're on the subject too, because I think it's definitely one of those ones where you can build a team that looks so good, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait, I have a huge hold of Gallade, you know? So just some like, and if you want to throw out any that you know of too, Tristan, some quick sort of flips that they might not necessarily work for every team, but Melmetal has a better Gallade matchup than Bastiodon. So, you know, that's a quick switch that you could see if you're losing a lot in other areas, but, you know, that's a potential like easy flip. Also, if you're running Haunter, you could look into running Sableye instead, which instead of now losing the Gallade matchup with your Ghost / Medicham counter, now you're winning the Gallade matchup. Also running Ice Beam Azumarill. Ice Beam Azu does a little bit better than the Play Rough Hydro Pump version. Because it's able to spam the ice beams to keep pace with that Leaf Blade. So those are just some quick, you know, fixes if you have a hole to Gallade.
Right, and then the other thing is Gallade is weak to flyers. So like your Skarmory, Altaria, Lugia, those will all handle Gallade just fine. Oh, and another switch that you could do is you could swap out Venusaur for Tropius, because Venusaur goes from losing to Gallade and Tropius beats it. So that's another swap to consider. I think, like you were saying, the general consensus is that Venusaur does seem to be better in this meta because it can beat Bastiodon where Tropius loses, and it also loses that head-to-head, or it also wins the head-to-head rather. But Gallade and some of these other anti-meta picks that are surfacing are potentially making Tropius a little more relevant.
Another thing too, you were talking about how like Gallade can punch a lot of things with its movesets. Is Skarmory, like if you lock your Skarmory into Gallade, just watch out, close combat can do some pretty heavy damage to it if you're not shielding it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, close combat definitely dents Skarmory pretty bad.
Yeah, you definitely have to shield, but I mean Skarmory, it's one of those situations where you can't get too overconfident and think you can just take a Leaf Blade, because if it gets to close combat, it'll take a huge chunk of health out of Skarmory. So just burn a shield if you feel like they got to close combat, and just keep, you know, air slashing away.
The other thing too with using Gallade is that a lot of its matchups are like have razor thin margins with energy. So like Bastiodon, it can beat it from like starting at equal energy, but if Bastiodon has one extra smackdown, then it can't get to the second close combat, so it loses pretty hard. And similar things happen with Azumarill too. So it's just like, it's one of those things where if you are down, it can't really be swapped into a lot of things that it like technically can counter and can beat. So I think that's one of the trickiest things to work around it as.
Right, and the other thing is the fact that most of the things it beats, it's not one of those mons where you can run through 1.5 or 2 of the opponent. It's most of the things it beats, it's beating one thing and then it's basically dead. I think with the one exception being if you get it in against a poison type, like a Venusaur or a Toxicroak or a Haunter, and you basically just kill it with Confusion, and then you can have that energy lead and a good chunk of health left to go heading into the next mon.
But it's almost like the ideal scenario is for you to win barely in a lead so that they can't really farm much energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sets the stage up. So if you're good at predicting leads, Gallade is pretty good in the lead situation. You just don't want to pair it up with some of the, like Skarmory, for example.
Well, the one problem with leading Gallade though is it loses that 2-shield matchup with Medicham. So if you lead Gallade and they lead Medicham, even though Gallade normally beats Medicham in the 0 and 1 shields, if they double shield, they're coming out of that matchup ahead, and with a pup boosted Medicham.
Right.
It loses
So
2 shields.
it's definitely not perfect.
Like,
Was that Polly?
I don't know if that was someone else, but I was just saying that there was I don't think Gallade wins many 2 shields. Like, it's pretty much almost dead by a lot of quick moves, even if it's neutral. Like, it can get off if it shields both Leaf Blades against like a Azumarill or a few close combats against Bastiodon. Like, it's dead for anything essentially if they 2 shield.
And we just had a comment from the Discord. Choose Master weighed in about Gallade, and he was talking about those swaps that we were talking about earlier, Polly, like the Venusaur to Tropius or Haunter to Sableye, etc. And he was saying his one loss in the regular rounds at regionals with the Gallade team was against the core meta team running all the things it can check/beat except Skarm. So the team was Haunter, Azu, Medi, Basti, Venu, and Skarm. And he said the sacrificing core coverage to be more Gallade resistant makes you weaker against the core. And he could win with just the core, basically. So he said not to overly off-meta yourself against basically this one. He called it the one anti-meta tool that's a Swiss Army knife, not a nuke.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's what I was trying to emphasize a little bit, was that it's not sort of like a one fit solution to like any team, but I think it's something that you could play around with. Melmetal and Bastiodon have a lot of similar coverages. There's some slight differences, and so if pivoting to Melmetal versus Bastiodon gives you a slightly better Gallade matchup while maintaining those other matchups, then I think that can be a good move for some teams. But yeah, I definitely agree. Don't rethink your whole team based off of an anti-meta mon.
Right, but at the same time, you do want to be aware of it and make sure that you don't have to rethink the whole team, but maybe you just make one tweak so that you're not too vulnerable.
Exactly. I mean, because then you become too predictable if your only answer is really Scar, and you kind of have to bring, say, for example, like Scar Azu every time, and they have Melmetal. Now, all of a sudden, they're confident in bringing Melmetal. They don't even have to bring Gallade because they could presume that the threat of Gallade to you might force you to bring Azu Scar every time. Just
right, I agree with that. And I guess that kind of leads into a good point, which I think is the trade-offs between Bastiodon and Melmetal. I think is pretty interesting here. Because Basti wins that head-to-head, which is pretty valuable. And Basti is better at out TDOing a lot of neutral matchups. But Melmetal seems to have a little wider coverage because it wins those Venusaur and Azu matchups. And also has the better Gallade matchup.
flip side of that, though, is that it has like worse, like it loses to Sableye. It has worse like Lantern matchups. So like kind of flex picks, I think, beat Melmetal a lot more.
Now, doesn't Melmetal have a better Lantern matchup? Because Lantern generally beats Bastiodon.
Yeah, but Lantern, I don't think Lantern has to shield bait to beat Melmetal, which it does to beat Bastiodon. Like Lantern can't beat Bastiodon with 2 Thunderbolts. It has to Hydro Pump.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, I guess that's right. Melmetal does win the 2 shield against Lantern, just barely, but I don't think that's enough of a selling point, really. What were you gonna say, AJ?
And just
AJ, I think you're cutting out.
you guys hear me?
AJ?
I think AJ said his mic is not working very well today, so you can, I think you can carry the show for now, Tristan.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess the last thing on Melmetal is it seems to have, like I was saying, it has a better matchup spread, but because it doesn't have that same bulk that Bastiodon does, it's a more shield needy, and even matchups that it normally would win from a 0-0 start, it's easier that it can lose those like later in the game depending on different situations. Like, for example, a Shadow Ball from Haunter can one-shot it, basically. Even, like, Sky Attack from Skarmory does, like, a decent chunk of damage, even though it's resisted. So, Melmetal seems a little more versatile, but Bastiodon still has that, like, tankiness to it. So I guess we'll probably jump into team review now, unless anyone has any specific meta topics or meta questions they want to cover first.
I was just going to say, I was looking at some of the teams, and I just wanted to make a comment about how, diverse the meta is. That it even still, it seems like it's changing a lot. Like Lugia was one of those picks that kind of, was discounted a little early on, and now it looks like it actually has a potential role as a flyer, providing some unique advantages. Not strictly better, than Skarmory. I think Skarmory is still the top flying option, but there are some advantages it offers, as well as even like Kanto Raichu, which we see a lot of people running now. So I mean, I think it's diverse, but it's also like still evolving, which is pretty cool, and also unfortunate we only have it for the short span, because it's just as diverse pretty much as freestyle.
Do you want to just touch on Lugia a little more and just explain kind of why it's come to the forefront and what the advantages of it are?
Sure, yeah, I can try to do that quickly. So Lugia, basically it kind of can give you 2 roles that, often you have a Medicham counter, hard Medicham counter, say like a Haunter, as well as a grass counter in like Skarmory. And Lugia is able to fill both of those roles with one spot. It doesn't have the great matchup coverage that Skarmory or Haunter has individually, but together you're able to sort of combine those roles and then possibly open up a spot for like say a Whiscash or something like that. I know Whiscash was something that I've been trying to like play around and figure out how I could maneuver that into a lineup, especially early on when Haunters were really common. Now maybe that's a different Pokemon for the Gallades or things like that we see popping up. But in any case, it can sort of give you that 2-for-1 and sort of let you have like a extra flex in some ways. Extra sensory can kind of help a lot with those poisons. I think some of the early analysis we were kind of focused on Dragon Tail, but extra sensory seems to be actually really useful in this meta, and it's able to farm Venusaur to some degree. Not quite as good as Skarmory. And the Sky Attack Azumarill matchup is really interesting because there's certain scenarios where it can get to a third Sky Attack and even beat Azu. But
Well, and I think the big thing is that it proves a better Medicham counter than Altaria or Skarmory because of its flying psychic typing, it double resists fighting.
right.
So it's double resisting all those counters and power up punches, and it's tanky enough and only has a single resistance to ice that it can tank. I think what is it like 2 ice punches?
Yeah,
And
it can
dies
tank
on the
too.
third.
Mhm.
So that it's just a better Medicham counter than the other flyers because just because of its typing and bulk, it doesn't need to shield as much as the other ones do.
Right. And it doesn't have to worry about 2-shield jam, which Skarmory does, which is huge.
Right. And Polly, someone was asking about a short discussion about Kanto Raichu, since you brought that up.
Yeah, so Kanto Raichu, it's similar to Alolan Raichu in that it's mostly you're gonna hit with those that hard hitting wild charge a lot. So because of the electric typing, similar to like Alolan Raichu, it's able to win some matchups like Melmetal, which you might not initially think. Obviously, it's great against Azu and Skarmory. And then the Brick Break gives you an option against Bastiodon, which is nice. So I think those are kind of it's slightly different than Alolan Raichu with a better charge move option against say like a Bastiodon or a Steel type. Whereas Alolan Raichu can beat Medicham with its Psychic typing. But those are two like very interesting electric picks for sure. Skarmory Azu are two really big threats in this meta, and so I think being able to hit both of those with either Kanto or Alolan Raichu is really big.
Right, or Melmetal even. Or
Yeah,
Lantern.
Melmetal too. Yep.
Or Lantern, because I don't know how many of you guys have seen Mason Valorash's video of his regionals, but he talked about how anytime he didn't see an electric threat, which Melmetal is like a pseudo-electric, but anytime he didn't see an electric threat, he would basically always bring that Azu Skarmory duo.
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of upset that, or at least make people think twice about bringing that, it can be pretty useful coverage.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Well, I actually got to jump off now, but it's been great talking the meta, and good luck with the team reviews.
All right, thanks, Polly. Catch you later.
Yeah.
So I think we can go ahead and start with the
Can
team.
you hear me
reviews.
better now?
Oh, hey AJ.
Can you hear me better a little bit now?
Yeah, it's slightly better.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm going in and out, so if I start lagging, just tag me.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
Do you have the first team? I have it in front of me.
Yeah, do you want to read it off?
Yeah, Math Nerd
Sure.
Board's team.
It's Bastiodon, Froslas, Azumarill, Altaria, Medicham, and Venusaur. Looking up those move sets. I don't think he listed them. No. Oh, Azumarill is Play Rough Ice Beam.
Okay, and it says he's still debating Skarmory versus Altaria and Haunter over Frostlass.
I'd agree with
I'm
both of those
assuming,
changes.
yeah, because I was gonna say, Melmetal beats Frostlass, right?
Probably.
Well, in any regard, his current team seems pretty weak to Bastiodon because Bastiodon just completely walls Altaria, is just gonna smack down Frostlass to death, and he's not running Hydro Pump, so his Azumarill is gonna lose that matchup too. So he's basically only relying on Metacham and Venusaur for his Bastiodon coverage. So someone running something like Bastiodon and Skarmory would start giving him some trouble.
So the Frostlass Melmetal matchup, Frostlass only wins 2 shields to 0.
Wow, that's rough.
But it's in some of those matches, like the no shields, it's pretty close. Like it leaves it with 14 HP. It's just whenever shields come into play, that's when like Thundershock neutral damage just takes over.
Right. Alright, yeah, so if they switched Altaria to Skarm and Frostlass into Haunter, that's like a pretty standard meta team. Like that's probably like the most common meta team, I'd say.
Yeah, that's what I've been messing around with.
And yeah, I like those changes because my biggest problem with Altaria is it just gets super walled by both Azu and Bastiodon. And also loses that flyer matchup with Skarmory.
Yeah.
No, with that team with those changes, is a little soft to Gallade, but like we kind of talked about earlier, and what Choose Master brought up, is that you don't necessarily need to like rip apart your whole team just to try to counter Gallade.
You can just rely on Skarmory.
Yeah, or even some of the other matchups it's winning, like the Azumarill and the Metacham matchups. It's not winning those in all even shield scenarios, and even when it does win, it's often getting knocked down to low health. So,
Yeah.
Even if your team isn't matched up the best and you take a narrow loss to it, like that's not the worst thing. I was scrimming against someone with Gallade the other day, and like I was able to beat them like with Venusaur and the no shield, or like one time I got my Haunter with an energy advantage, and so I was able to get off like a Shadow Punch before I got off the third confusion kind of a thing. So like it's a good mon, but it's not like indestructible. All right, AJ, anything else on that team, or should we go to the next one?
No, nothing on that team. I'm just tagging Trainer Rememco since he's up next. I don't know if he's on the stream.
All right, so Trainer Memco is running Skarmory, Azumarill. Right now, he's on the Ice Beam Play Rough moveset, but he's debating Hydro Pump. Whiscash, Venusaur, Metacham, and Sableye. It looks like he is on the stream, but his mic is muted right now. So Trainer Memco, if you want to say anything, just either type it out in the text channel or unmute yourself. And yeah. So what do you think, AJ?
Off the bat, Sableye is nice just to be able to flip that Haunter match. It sort of fills that role of walling Metacham. Not totally convinced with Whiscash here, but I know a lot of people swear by it just because it's got so much shield baiting potential. He said he's running Play Rough Ice Beam on
Right,
Azumarill.
so that's kind of my worry right now is this team seems pretty inviting to Skarmory. If I was playing against him, I would bring Skarmory every time and just like gamble on my leads, and then if I have a bad lead, I would just safe switch to Skarmory because he doesn't have any electric type or Bastiodon or anything really to wall Skarmory. Like his best Skarmory answers
Yeah.
are Azumarill kind of, but it doesn't even have a Hydro Pump, and then a Skarmory Mirror Match.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
And the other thing is like he's really he's really relying on a little bit of luck against the Skarmory, which is arguably one of the most popular picks
Yeah.
available in the regionals meta. Oh, Trainer Ramamco, you're on.
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt.
Hey, go
But,
ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did hear a bunch of people say that I do need Melmetal on my side. I'm gonna work on getting the dust for that second move tonight. I'm not entirely sure if I need Rock Slide because Thunderbolt I think might do the job by itself.
Well, so here's the thing. You don't need Melmetal. It doesn't have to be Melmetal. You could run Bastiodon. You could try, like, Lantern. You could try Alolan Raichu or Kanto Raichu. It doesn't have to be Melmetal. But,
Okay.
so you can play around with that and see what you want to run as your Skarmory counter, because both, like, Steel types and Electric types are going to be pretty good Skarmory counters.
hmm
But if you are running Melmetal, I would say try to get that second move because Rock Slide has that really good shield baiting potential,
hmm
and also gives you neutral damage against Venusaur, and super
Yeah.
effective damage against Tropius, which helps you in those matchups.
Yeah. And
And
also
any
another thing.
and any time that both moves are neutral, like Rock Slide just comes out so much faster.
Yeah. And I was wondering, you said I've never heard of people running any Raichu or any other electric type besides Lantern. How does Raichu perform? Because I do have an Alolan Raichu prepared for Nightmare Cup.
Right. So Alolan Raichu, it beats Azumarill, it beats Skarmory, and with its Psychica subtyping, it beats Medicham. So that's kind of an interesting niche that not many other mons can fill. And then we kind of talked about the Kanto Raichu earlier, where it has that Brick Break for like shield baiting and for some of the steel types.
And then if I chose Raichu, I mean, I can try and get the dust for Melmetal tonight, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that if I did choose Raichu, either Kanto Raichu, I don't have a Brick Break Raichu, but if I
Well,
went with,
Brick Break isn't Legacy. Brick Break's just in the move pool.
oh, okay, all
Thundershock.
right,
But
Thundershock is
ideally,
legacy.
the legacy is Thundershock, which is definitely the better option.
yeah. But Spark performs almost as well, right?
Almost as well, but it has worse performance in the Bastiodon matchup because
Yeah,
I think you don't get off enough brick breaks, and I think you end up losing.
gotcha,
But
gotcha.
Spark is serviceable. There's just like a drop off, a little bit.
Okay. So then, if I did go ahead and choose a Raichu, or if I wanted to put Melmetal in some sort of spot, should I switch out Whiscash for that? Because I do like the I pointed out in the submission chat that I do like the with a Whiscash Skarmory combo because it is kind of hard to cover if I go ahead and switch in my Whiscash. Say someone switches in their Venusaur or their Tropius, I can just switch to my Skarmory, and the
I
vice
mean,
versa.
they do have pretty good coverage with each other, but the one thing is like a Hydro Pump Azumarill is gonna be kind of problematic for both of them.
Yeah.
And Azumarill is pretty popular. And then Medicham beats Whiscash and can dent Skarmory, or in the two shields beat Skarmory. So like they do have good coverage, but like some of those neutral damage threats can kind of hit both of them.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's hard to say for sure. I mean, I think I'm a little biased where, like, I see the value and the strength in Mud Boys. I think they're good, but sometimes I just question if they're like, I feel like they're just barely not good enough.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know. I just feel like they're maybe lacking some of the matchups against other meta mons. I don't know. That's just me personally. But like, you could
Gotcha.
definitely run a Mud Boy and do well.
Gotcha. I do think that before I was running Hydro Pump on my Azumarill, and I saw how well it performed against Skarmory, and I switched back to Ice Beam because I kind of wanted that coverage. But for my team, let's say I would run an Electric type instead of Whiscash. Would Hydro Pump be a good option there as well?
I think so because Hydro Pump allows you to win that Bastiodon matchup. Lets you. I mean, you still lose to Melmetal, but you definitely damage it more. And it gives you that better Skarmory matchup. But I mean, I think the Azumarill moveset is probably one of the biggest points of contention right now, because Ice Beam makes you less vulnerable to Gallade, and some of the other like random anti-meta picks. And Ice Beam also allows you to beat Metacham in the 2-shield matchup. But at the same time, that Hydro Pump can be pretty valuable in those matchups I just talked about. And then some people
To
were
put it
even
one,
questioning running like an Ice Beam Hydro Pump, but then you're sacrificing the mirror, which is kind of risky given how common Azumarill is. What are you gonna say, AJ?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, to put it in perspective, I've seen all three of those movesets played, and I've seen all three of those in situations where it's thanks to the moveset that they won, and it's because of the moveset that they lost. I've been in situations where, thanks to having Hydro Pump, I've been able to beat a Melmetal with a decent amount of HP. But I've also been in situations where I really wish I would have had Ice Beam, because I would have been able to nuke, say, a Venusaur or a Tropius, had I been able to get Ice Beam off.
Right, yeah,
So
there's a
it's
lot
just,
of.
it's one of those things. It really depends on your playstyle, on the rest of your team comp, and your TMs, I guess, too.
Yeah, and I mean, some of those times, like, you might remember, like, oh, this won me a match, it's good, or oh, this lost me a match, it's bad, but that's just kind of like selection bias, I guess. But, like, I know the other day I was battling with someone, and I had a Azumarill versus Skarmory, and I was running Hydro Pump at the time, and, I went for a Hydro Pump right away, and I didn't shield it, expecting it to be like an Ice Beam. And that got their Skarmory almost all the way down, and then I was able to just energy farm them with Bubble from there. So there's definitely pros and cons to both.
I mean, yeah, I'm interested now because if I can't get the 100,000 dust and then maybe the 75,000 dust that I need for both Sableye and Melmetal, I'll probably just run a Kanto Raichu with Brick Break and Spark because my legacy is like 1700 CP and that sucks.
Well, you just have to look
Yeah.
at the coverage of your team to see if the Kanto Raichu or the Alolan Raichu gives you better coverage.
So looking at my team off the bat, do you think that what kind of coverage would I have to be wary of? Just Azumarill and Skarmory or something else?
Well, they both beat Azumarill and Skarmory, but then the Alolan subtyping gives it a better Metacham matchup, while making it a bit weaker to Ghosts, whereas the Kanto has a worse Metacham matchup, but then picks up slightly better matchups with Steel types.
Which there aren't that many of except for Skarmory and Melmetal, but
Well,
what's
Skarmory,
the
Melmetal, and
other?
Bastiodon.
True. And then that's what I would have. That's what I wanted Whiscash for, just in case I came across Bastion mainly. But
Right. So
Um,
maybe the Kanto one is the better option for your team then.
mhm. All right. I appreciate that. I'm probably gonna TM my Azumarill to Hydro Pump as well.
But yeah, the big thing I would say is try to get that second move on Sableye.
Mhm.
Because whether you run Shadow Sneak or Power Gem, and both have pros and cons, that
Mhm.
gives you that neutral damage against the Azumarill so that you don't get walled as much. Because Azumarill resists foul play. So
Yep.
having that neutral option on Azumarill is pretty helpful.
Yeah. So running Shadow Sneak and Foul Play, but Power Gem is only for the Flyers if you get in that situation.
Well, it's for the Flyers, but it also hits Azumarill for neutral. So there's pros and cons to both because you're going to be using foul play for your super effective against anything that's psychic or ghost.
Right.
And then both Shadow Sneak and Power Gem hit Azumarill for neutral. Shadow Sneak fires off faster, and then Power Gem is a bit better against Flyers, but you have to realize also that Skarmory is kind of the premier flyer here, it seems like, and Skarmory is taking neutral from Power Gem. So, so Power Gem is mostly only going to be for like Altaria, Lugia, and Tropius.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a tough choice.
Wouldn't you be fine against Lugia with the foul play and Shadow?
Oh right, yeah, duh, yeah. So it's really for just Altaria and Tropius then.
Yeah. But I do think that I do prefer running Shadow Sneak in Foul Play just because shield baiting, maybe.
Well, it's not really shield baiting because foul play and Shadow Sneak are the same energy cost, but.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, if in Foul Play and Power Gem is the recommended moveset, but if I think I might still just go ahead and run Shadow Sneak and Foul Play. So I appreciate it, guys.
I mean, I think part of the reason that Power Gem is generally the more common moveset is because that's for freestyle, where Altaria sees more play, Tropius sees a little more play, and also dark types like Alolan Muck and Skuntank see more play. Because the dark types are going to be resisting all your moves if you're not running Power Gem. But the thing is that in this meta, so far it seems like the only dark type that's seeing much play is Sableye. And so you don't have to worry about those Skuntanks and Alolan Mucks and such. Yeah. But just know that if anyone does run those or an Umbreon or something, and you don't have Power Gem, then you're basically just getting walled.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. So next team is Lucky. AJ, do you want to read that one off?
Yeah. So let's see. Lucky submitted Gallade with standard moveset, Haunter with Shadow Ball, Lugia Extrasensory, Sky Attack, Hydro Pump, Azumarill with Hydro Pump Play Rough, and Shiny for extra brownie points. And he's got a perfect Medicham with the standard set, and then a Thundershock, Wild Charge, Brick Break, Raichu, Kanto Raichu. That.
So right off the bat, my biggest concern with this team is if they come up against a Sableye. Because they've got 4 that leads to Sableye, and I believe Sableye also beats Kanto Raichu. So if the opponent has a Sableye, Azumarill is basically their only answer.
Yeah. He's got a decent amount of answers to Azumarill. And with that moveset, he's also got a decent amount of answers to Bastiodon. So it's otherwise balanced. It's just the Sableye would definitely be a problem. You'd be bringing a Azumarill every game against a Sableye team.
I'm trying to think what other matchups. It might struggle a bit against Melmetal. Right, because what answers are there for Melmetal? Just Metacham and Raichu?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the Melmetal Lugia matchup, but I assume that Melmetal wins pretty handily. Shadow Ball Haunter, I mean, gives Melmetal the sweats for sure. I mean, it's not an easy match for it.
Right, but if someone was running a team with Melmetal and Sableye, that's going to be a little dicey now.
For sure.
I just feel like maybe they're jumping on the bandwagon of these kind of up and coming anti-meta picks, and they've gone like one too far. Is kind of how I'm feeling. Because like the Gallade, Lugia, Raichu, and even Haunter to an extent have all kind of risen in popularity recently, and it seems like maybe they've just gone with one too many. What do you think?
Yeah. Although being weak to Melmetal is not like it's something you can't maneuver around, you know? It is kind of funny that this team, I guess, Whiscash would put a neat dent into it, whereas it doesn't so much with other teams. I think Whiscash
They
doesn't.
have Gallade though. Gallade beats Whiscash, I think, in all even
Yeah.
shields, and then they have Azumarill and Metacham, which generally beat Whiscash too.
That's true. No, I'm not saying Whiscash is necessarily an opening here, but it's just kind of interesting to see potentially 3 out of the 6 that Whiscash could deal with. So I don't know why you would bring Lugia and Haunter though. I thought the whole point of bringing Lugia was that it had a lot of the similar coverage that Haunter had, and it can beat Metacham into 2 shields. So it just seems like
Yeah.
it might be overstacked.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And then the other thing I was going to say is I'm not super familiar with like the Lugia matchups, but I feel like a Quagsire that was running like Stone Edge and Sludge Bomb might cause some problems.
Yep.
Because I would assume that Quagsire with Stone Edge would have a decent Lugia matchup. The Mud Shot plus just any charge move should deal with the Haunter and the Raichu, and then the Sludge Bomb would deal with the Azumarill. So what I'm hearing you say is they should probably drop either Haunter or Lugia, right?
Well, if they dropped Lugia in favor for Skarmory, that wouldn't really help with Melmetal.
It would help with Sableye a little bit. But yeah, it wouldn't
but
help with Melmetal.
not definitively.
So then if they dropped Haunter, what would be the replacement?
Haunter is functioning as I guess a soft counter to Azumarill and a hard counter to Metacham. It might even be worth considering. Well, what do you think about like Whiscash? against.
Whiscash in place of Haunter?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
That might
Because he's
work.
already set with Gallade, Azumarill, and Lugia against against an opposing Medicham.
Well, plus the mirror, yeah.
Lugia-
And then he has like
Yeah,
Gallade, the mirror, and Raichu for an Azumarill. And he has wait, what's the moveset in Azumarill that he's running? Hydro Pump, right? So he has Gallade in some matchups, plus Azumarill, Medicham, and kind of Raichu for an opposing Bastiodon.
he'd be really stacked against Bastiodon for sure. I mean, I wouldn't expect a Bastiodon against if he brought in Cash.
What if he brought in Bastiodon or Melmetal for Haunter?
Oh, that's true.
Probably Bastiodon, because Melmetal kind of overlaps with Raichu. But if he brought in Bastiodon, Bastiodon beats Melmetal. And it also beats Sableye because it just out TDOs it and just like smackdowns it to death, more or less.
Yeah, those are a few options there. I mean, this team, like just as we're saying, having this much of an opening to Sableye, which is sort of increasing in popularity, I don't know if it's something that you can really afford, especially because Sableye is kind of tanky. So I don't know.
Yeah, because it seems like
feel
the
like it's-
Haunter Gallade hype trains are taking off, and so people are looking for what beats Haunter and Gallade, and then they're settling on Sableye. So
Yeah. Okay, so I got a few comments from him in the chat. He says he's still at work. It is meant to bait Skarmory and Sableye in, usually using Kanto Raichu and Azumarill against those two. And Kanto Raichu wins the 2-2 matchup versus Sableye. So if both use 2 shields, it uses... Oh, I see. So he is kind of maneuvering around the Sableye matchup, and he's got quite a lot of familiarity with the specifics of the shield matchups, Raichu and Sableye. So it just sounds like he's banking on Sableye. I mean, on his Raichu doing most of the damage against Sableye.
I mean, I guess it could work if the intent is to bait something in, and he's practiced enough to be able to deal with that once it's baited in. That might work.
Yeah. And he's pretty stacked on Medicham counters. But is he really running anything that fears Medicham? Like, it just seems to me that the whole point of being stacked against Medicham counters would be to be able to run whatever you want. You know? Like you'd be very comfortable running a Bastiodon if you feel like the other guy isn't going to run his Medicham or is afraid.
Right, but there's nothing. I mean, it seems like he's just scaring off Medicham for the sake of scaring off Medicham.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really seem like there's any reason you would run Medicham against this team.
Yeah. But it sounds like he's maneuvering around it, and it's sort of working out for him. I'd be interested to see if once he plays his tournament, if he could report those results back to us. It's not like it's not like being strong against Sableye is a requirement. It's totally plausible. You don't play any Sableye teams.
Exactly.
But it'd be a pretty big opening if you get a really good Sableye user against you.
Yeah, and especially like I said, if it was someone that was pairing Sableye with Melmetal.
You want to go to the next team?
Well,
Yeah.
before we go to the next team, a quick thanks to Persis Demos, who just subscribed to us with their Twitch Prime. So our second ever subscriber on the channel. Thanks so much for that. And
Thank you.
yeah, we're still working on emotes and subscriber badges. But we appreciate you dropping your Twitch Prime subscription on us, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, those emotes are gonna be pretty funny, especially if you're a longtime user of our Discord. We've got plenty of memes, crossing 5,000 players, a lot of colorful personalities. So over time, we've sort of trash talk each other enough that we have fun.
For sure.
So there's going to be a lot of camera ups.
You just spoiled it. But yeah, next team
Alright,
is
so-
Blitzy.
All right.
Yeah, next team is Blitzy's, and his team is Azumarill, and he's running it with Hydro Pump and Ice Beam. And then Medicham, Bastiodon, Sableye running Shadow Claw, Power Gem, Foul Play, Haunter with the Shadow Ball, Shadow Punch, and Glade. And he says he calls this team Scaring Away Medilead. So it looks like his goal is to discourage the Medicham so that he can run Bastiodon.
I mean, I see that team as also discouraging Azumarill for the most part. Because if I were... I mean, I normally don't assume the other guy isn't running Play Rough. Like, that's arguably one of the better moves that Azumarill has. Just because of that prevalence of the mirror matchup. So if you sacrifice a mirror matchup in favor of, playing these sort of mind games, once the opponent knows that you don't have Play Rough, it might already be too late and has to sort of force them to readjust.
Right, especially if you, maybe don't even bring Azumarill in game.
Right.
Is it that stacked against Azumarill, though?
I mean, it's not stacked, but, if he's running Hydro Pump Play Rough, you got the 2 shields Medicham in there. And if he's running Ice Beam Play Rough, then you got Bastiodon. So those kind of interchange. And then
Right,
you have
and then-
Azumarill itself for the mirror, and those other 3. Haunter and Gallade. So really,
Right.
Sableye is the only straight up weak to Azum.
So, I'm trying to think. Do you see any holes here?
It seems like it's a little heavy on counters just for one thing. That being said, he's kind of revolving his gameplay around it, so I'm not so sure that I would deter him from that. If it's working, it's working.
Right, but I'm just saying, because he's stacking against Medicham, do you see any other holes that have kind of opened up as a result?
Skarmory,
Hello, guys.
for one.
I'm here.
Hello?
Hello, I'm Blazes.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
Yeah, so my initial thought was about just discourage Medilead so I can use Bastiodon. But since you guys mentioned Azumarill weakness, so yeah, I think either Glade or Haunter will be also picked up in my team. In the trio.
Okay, so you're thinking of running Bastiodon plus either Haunter or Gallade, basically all the time.
Yes, and I'm not really comfortable with Glade right now. Just Haunter, I'm quite comfortable with it. But if I run these two, I'm really weak to my boys. So definitely I need either Medicham or Azumarill.
Well, if you're not comfortable with Gallade, then why are you running it?
I put there just like a bait.
Well,
And
I'm
also
just wondering... Or go on, what are you going to say?
Yeah, and also today I noticed that this team is weak to Shiftry. Really, really weak to Shiftry.
How many Shift Tree have you seen in regionals?
No, so far I don't think anyone gonna pick it. But since
The
LA
sh-
regional is like 138 people, I might see some.
Does Shift Tree beat Bastion?
Let me write. I think it beat.
I think it should be neutral.
It beat Bastion in one shield. Yeah, only one shield.
Okay, so that's not too bad. And how does Haunter do with Shift Tree?
Hunter. Well, if Hunter runs Shadow Ball, it's let me see. If Hunter runs Shadow Ball and Shadow Punch, it only wins no shield, and it's barely win. Only 7 HP
Okay.
left.
Well, I was just wondering, what if you swapped out Gallade for Venusaur?
Yeah, I could do that. Because Gallade, so far after testing, I barely have any chance like get it in a really good position.
Right, so if you're not familiar with it and it doesn't seem to be doing too well for you, then maybe you should drop it. And Venusaur would give you that similar grass coverage, while also, I mean, if Shift Tree was ever a concern, then Venusaur would give you better Shift Tree coverage if you're actually worried about that.
Yeah, probably. Let me see. Does
Because
Venusaur
Gallade
scares
is
away?
not necessarily good for bluffing, say. Like,
Yeah,
suppose you don't have a Bastiodon. Like, Bastiodon is a pretty decent one to bluff because of the effect it has on how the opponent has to, build their team to be able to counter Bastiodon. But a player that's unprepared for Bastiodon will most likely lose. But Gallade doesn't have that same effect. He mostly swings matches. That's its bread and butter. So,
Right, and the other thing is that some people aren't even familiar with Gallade, and so if you're bluffing a Gallade, that's not going to matter because they don't really know about Gallade anyways.
yeah, makes sense. Or probably no, I shouldn't rush. Or probably I should put in not Tropius. Probably just a Venusaur.
Yeah, I would say maybe try that team with Venusaur and see how that goes.
Yeah, okay, I can try. Cause actually, right now my team only has 3 basic sets: Azumarill, Bastiodon. Well, not even Bastiodon. Sometimes I switch to Melmetal, and then Medicham. Is 3. These like the main runners I use.
Right, and yeah, you could throw in Melmetal instead of Bastiodon too. That's another viable option.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say maybe try Venusaur in that Gallade spot, and then you can see if you like the Bastiodon or the Melmetal in that other spot.
Melmetal, so far, my impression is it's quite the game pace is much faster than Bastiodon.
Yeah, definitely, because it has faster charge moves, and a better energy generating quick move.
Yeah.
But it's less tanky.
Yeah, I think I'll just play around these 2. And probably, yeah. Because here, right now, I think I'm kind of like a little bit weak to Skarmory as well. This team. Probably I gonna invite Skarmory lead.
Yeah, I guess so. But you do have the Bastiodon. You do have the Hydro Pump Azumarill.
Yeah.
And you have the Shadow Ball Haunter, which, although people won't know that not everyone will know that it can beat Skarmory, you do
Yeah,
have the potential to beat Skarmory there.
And especially for Azumarill, they might not know the moveset. They might think it's Ice Beam and Play Rough. So basically, it's
Right.
like game 1. If I won the mind game, I would probably play around. But if I lost, then yeah, that's straight loss.
All right. Well, anything else you want to say before we move on to the next team?
Yeah, I think today my submission is just here. I'll just play around and submit later. Thank you, guys.
All right. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for submitting, and good
Yeah.
luck. All right. So JRE Seawolf is up next, and they're running Melmetal, Skarmory, Tropius, but they're considering running Air Slash instead of Razor Leaf. They're running Ice Beam Player F Azumarill. They're running a Legacy Raichu, and they're running Toxicroak.
And they also added a note saying that they can power up a Sableye or a Medicham, but not both. He doesn't have the dust for both. And he's trying to go anti-meta. He's probably weak to Ghosts. And this, the selection is based on practice matches so far that he's pretty well. And he's also considering swapping Toxicroak for Lucario.
Okay, well, I don't like the Toxicroak to Lucario swap. Because then your fighting type is going to lose to basically anyone else's fighting type. And you're also going to struggle if anyone's running like a Mudboy. I've done quite a bit of testing with Toxicroak, and I did really like it. Because it has similar matchups, winning matchups to Medicham, where it's beating Melmetal and it's beating Bastiodon, but then it has a bit of a better matchup with Medicham and a better Azumarill matchup. So I really like Toxicroak, and I'm just not really sure where Lucario kind of fits into this meta.
It seems like if you're going to run something that isn't like the primary meta of its typing, you wouldn't want to sacrifice being able to beat that same one. So like, if you're using Croak instead of Medicham, like you kind of do want that off-meta choice to beat Medicham. Like that's what's giving you the edge. Because on paper, Medicham is better. So that's the advantage you're gaining. But you don't get that with Lucario.
Right. And the other thing that's interesting about Toxicroak, which I didn't realize until just the other day, is that Toxicroak actually beats Haunter in the No Shield. Because it just gets to that Mud Bomb and kills it. Oh, and the other thing with Toxicroak is it has better grass matchups than Medicham. But then on the flip side, you're taking a winning match against Mudboys, and that becomes a losing matchup. And you get worse matchups against Flyers. So there's definitely trade-offs, but I do really like Toxicroak and think that if you want to run a fighter that's not Medicham, that it's definitely Toxicroak and not Lucario.
That being said, I mean, he's debating between a Sableye or a Medicham. I mean, if you don't have a Medicham by now, bro, you just need to get one, because it's just so good. So, I really don't think there's a debate between if you're going to power up Medicham or Sableye. Which one do you choose?
Right, but which one do you think fits the team better? Like, obviously Medicham, I would say, is the better, like, general long-term investment, because it's just so good. But, like, meshing with the rest of his team.
I mean, if the dust is such a concern, then I would not prioritize Medicham or Sableye, So, I don't see it as an either-or choice here. But generally speaking, if dust is a concern, then you're also concerned about long-term investments, and Medicham, in my opinion, is a better long-term investment.
I would agree with that. The other dust consideration, though, is adding that second move to Skarmory, because Flash Cannon is just so helpful if you get trapped by a Bastiodon.
Right.
Like, the damage output between a Sky Attack and a Flash Cannon is enormous. Sky Attack,
Yeah.
like, barely dents it, and Flash Cannon chunks, I don't know, it's what, like a third or a little more than that of Bastiodon's health?
I
And
don't
so-
think it's a third, but it's a respectable chunk versus. It's the difference between, you being able to farm a Skarmory and you having to like use charge moves to get rid of it.
It's almost a third. I just ran the sim. It's doing 40 damage, and Bastion has 132 health. Give or take.
Right.
So it's not quite a third, but it's pretty close to a third.
Looks like Blandon might be joining in on these team reviews.
Okay, cool, yeah. Let's tell him to hop on. Okay,
He's
so
also
then...
considering Air/Tropius. I would say that if you're gonna run Air/Tropius, you're basically doubling up on Flyer and losing the Tropius coverage with Razor Leaf. That said, if you drop Skarmory and keep Air Slash on Tropius, you're sort of giving away your hand, so it's somewhat of a trade-off.
Right, because Air/Tropius struggles a bit more with Azumarill and Mudboys. But then...
How does Toxicroak do against Double Shield Medi? That's my question.
That is a good question. Let me look it up.
It wins. I have the sim on the stream actually.
Yeah. No, 2 shields? No.
Yeah, if
it
Maddie
loses.
shields both.
2 shields, it loses.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Medi using the 2 shields or
Both of
Toxicroak
them using 2
Both.
shields.
Oh, both using 2 shields? Yeah, then.
Yeah. So this team is kind of weak to 2 shield Metachamp.
Medicham, yeah.
Is there anything that beats a 2 shields in this team?
Azumarill, because he's running Ice Beam Play Rough.
Ah, right. Still, it's a pretty big threat. Metachamp is on most teams. Yeah, it does kind of seem like Sableye would be the only thing that will be able to help that problem, but it's a huge investment.
Okay, so let's say he ran Sableye, then what does he drop?
Aren't Raichu and Melmetal having a lot of overlap there?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. They have pretty similar coverage, so it seems like one of those two would be the one to drop.
Yeah.
Right, because they both act as like Skarmory and Azumarill counters. They both lose to Mudboys. I mean, I guess Raichu has a little bit of a better Bastiodon matchup than Melmetal does, but besides that, it seems like they're... Oh, and Melmetal has like a better Altaria matchup, but besides that, they seem pretty comparable.
The problem is if he loses Melmetal, Skarmory almost runs unfettered. So there's trade-offs there too.
Right, but he does have a mirror match, and Azumarill, even without Hydro Pump, I believe beats Skarmory in the no shield and ties Skarmory in the one shield.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, man. I think it's too much off meta, especially if you start putting Air Slash on Tropius and stuff like that. You're going off meta for the sake of going off meta, rather than banking on a very specific strategy. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Alright, you want to go on to the next team?
Yeah, so I guess the parting thought is probably drop the Raichu in favor of a Sableye or even a Haunter. Would you agree, AJ?
Yeah, most likely. Although I'm hesitant to recommend a Sableye since he's got budget restrictions.
Alright, so next team then.
Alright, Sevitin Ale, it's got Skarmory, Azu with Hydro Pump, assuming play rough, Metacham, Melmetal, Haunter with Shadow Ball, and Venusaur or Gallade, and he needs help there. Basically a full meta team. The trade-offs. I mean, Sevitin, you're on here, right?
Hello. Yes. I am. I just got here because I was like hearing a bit and I dropped by just in time, I guess. Hi everyone.
Welcome.
Hey. So why are you
Yes.
doubting between Venusaur and Gallade?
You know, the thing is that I tried comparing both Venusaur and Gallade, and basically they cover more or less the same thing, but Venusaur is like a bit tankier, but Gallade on the other hand has like more damage to it, I guess. Also, Gallade is kind of like Bronson was in Kingdom Come. It's like not. It's not easy to use it like comfortable, and it's a bit clunky, I guess, because maybe because of the confusion being too slow, and that's. I think that's a drawback for me because Venusaur is just you try to get up Frenzy Bland, and that's most of the job that Venusaur does, and it's quite easy to use it, unlike Gallade. But Gallade may have I don't know, maybe a slightly different matchup.
Well, then why don't you just run Venusaur then? Because you also said you have a bit of a Sableye problem, and Venusaur would definitely help with that over Gallade.
Yeah, I was actually running some simulations on that, and surprisingly, I found out that Venusaur barely gets out alive of the Sableye matchup, and that's with optimal IV. So mine has definitely not optimal IVs at all. So I'd say that it's not a counter to Sableye, but at least it neutralizes it. In a way.
Yeah, whereas Gallade would just lose. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you ran Venusaur, you'd have Azumarill beats it, And then you'd have Skarmory, Melmetal, and Venusaur, who all kind of are checks to Gallade, who like neutralize it. Or not Gallade, I mean Sableye, sorry. But you'd have one counter and 3 checks, which I think is pretty good Sableye coverage then.
Yeah, I think so. I have another question that came to me when I was doing some practice battles with a friend. I noticed that I have a really bad matchup against both Sableye and electric type, because when I try to, for example, go and try to beat Sableye, for example, with Azumarill or Skarmory, then my opponent had already a Raichu, for example, to beat both Azumarill and Skarmory.
Well, for electric types, Venusaur generally beats electric types. Medicham should beat most of the electric types besides Alolan Raichu. And if you do see an Alolan Raichu,
that was exactly the matchup that I had to face today.
Well, if you see an Alolan Raichu, then Haunter beats that. Right, so you have Haunter beats Alolan Raichu, and depending on Haunter's IVs, Haunter can also beat Lantern. And I believe Haunter also has a decent Kanto Raichu matchup too. So Haunter can help with your electric matchups. Venusaur should generally beat the electric types because it resists electric moves. And Frenzy Plant is just so good. And then Medicham should beat all the electrics besides Alolan Raichu, I believe. So I don't think you're too bad off against electric types, especially if you run that Venusaur. So it seems like running Venusaur over Gallade will help some of these things you're worried about.
Is it too important for Venusaur to have like pretty good IV or something? Because mine is definitely
I don't think
not
so.
good.
Not really.
Generally,
I mean,
no.
having Frenzy Plant is the bigger deal.
Okay, so I'm kinda relieved, but I really need to keep on testing Gallade. Maybe I end up using it, but I don't feel like right now. I don't feel like I will be using it, but I want to try him out anyway.
Yeah, I mean, try them out. Familiarize yourself with the matchups. Generally, based on what we're seeing in your team, I think Venusaur would probably fit in better with what we perceive your playstyle to be. But
yeah, especially
either
considering
one are good options.
Yeah, especially considering the kind of concerns you voiced about what you're worried about facing. Venusaur definitely helps with all of those matchups, whereas Gallade doesn't so much. So I mean, try them both, but it seems like Venusaur will fit better with what you've kind of voiced to us. And if that's the case, then I mean, sure, try Gallade if you want, but you don't want to spend too much time practicing with something you probably won't be using. So
yeah, another thing is that even though today I really needed Venusaur, and all the other matchups I had like for practice purposes, I didn't even use, for example, Venusaur that much, or any grass type for that matter. It's like sometimes I don't even feel like bringing it because maybe Haunter is enough, or
I mean, that's fair, but you have to realize too that sometimes just having a particular Pokemon in your team, even though you're not bringing it, is still influencing how your opponent plays and what they bring. But anyways, I think we need to move on to the next team now.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll keep on hearing.
Thanks for submitting.
Listening to you. Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
Hey, Blandon, are you there? Can you hear us?
I don't hear Blandon, but we do have the next team up, Vexillus. I do see him connected in the voice channel here. He's running Whiscash with Mudshot, Mud Bomb, and Blizzards, a standard set. Azoo with Pump and Play Rough. Metacham, standard set, and then he's running some off-meta picks with Shift Tree, which we talked about before. Triple Grass on it. Mantine with Bubble, Aerial Ace, and Ice Beam. And then a Alolan Raichu with that standard moveset. So, yeah. Those three are interesting. I don't think I've seen 2 out of those yet in any practice matches. So, Vex, you're on the channel.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk us through why you use those 3?
Shift Tree. Well, I'll go to Shift Tree first. Mainly, I have Shift Tree because I needed a grass user, and I already have Shift Tree ready for the Nightmare Cup, and I actually do not have the dust to power up an Ivysaur or any similar grass types, and I don't have access to a Frenzy Plant Venusaur either. As for the Mantine, I was looking for different Pokemon to use in regionals, and at the time during this week I was severely lacking on dust. I think until recently I just had like 180,000 to use, and part of that was used to power up the Metacham that I'm using now, and then Skarmy was too expensive of an investment to make because of the cost to power it up and then the second move and everything. And the Mantine, it was a cheaper option because evolving the Mantike, and it has wing attack to deal with the grass types. The flying type makes it double resist the Whiscash and Quagsire. The Ice Beam helps deal with it helps a little bit with the grass types as well, but when you shield bait, it can help you win against Altaria as well. And while it doesn't dominate any matchup specifically, it does do neutral in a lot of them, which I think is pretty valuable. And it already fills the slot of being weak to electric, so Skarmy wouldn't fit anyway. And the Raichu also is, I needed an electric type to counter Skarmory, and because I'm already using it for Nightmare, it was the best fit.
So mainly I'm hearing budget restrictions are a driving factor.
Yeah, there's also, I don't have access to Tropius or Bastiodon. Or a Melmetal, for that matter.
I'm assuming it's the same thing goes for like Lugia and what about single move Skarmory without the flash cannon?
Single move Skarmory is an option, but comparing the two, I like that Mantine can neutralize a lot of matchups rather than dominating the grass matchups. So I just take that value more so than the domination that Skarmory would bring.
That's fair. I think your biggest problem, and Tristan, you jump in at any time, is going to be a Venusaur. I don't see any good answer for Venusaur on this team.
Mantine can be Venusaur because I'm running the wing attack on it, and for the most part, even if I don't rely on shield baiting, I can still beat Venusaur in the
Oh, you're running wing attack.
yeah.
Oh, because it has bubble listed there. That's why.
Oh, did it? Oh yeah, that was a mistake by me. Yeah, I'm running wing attack.
Even with wing attack, it's still gonna be a nuisance for you. You have Cash, Azu. The matchup with Medi is iffy. Then you have Alolan Raichu and Shiftry, which it resists all of its moves. So it's still gonna be a problem, and it deals neutral damage to Mantine. I'd be kind of surprised if you can switch in Mantine against this Venusaur comfortably. Can you?
Haven't been able to test anything. I actually don't have many PvP partners to do online battles against to test things out. So I've been mostly I've been relying on doing sims and making sheets to compare the numbers between each of the matchups.
What about Ivysaur? Do you have any very high
He just
level
said he
Ivysaur?
didn't have the dust for it. Was the problem?
Yeah,
You're
the last of the
not
dust I
able to
spent.
catch one.
I
Well-
don't think I would be able to in time. All the dust I used was spent finishing up the Medicham, and I was only able to use the Medicham because it was a lucky trade.
Well, I mean, maybe see, because Bulbasaurs are kind of common with the event right now. That still has what, like half a day left or something.
Yeah.
Maybe you can try to find if you ever get sunny weather, you might be able to find like a high level weather boosted Bulbasaur that you could evolve.
Yeah, if I'm able
Do you
to
have
find
any
one,
people to
then,
trade with?
I could look and ask.
Because
I
like
am part
Bulbasaur,
of
like
the
a level
recruiting
35 Bulbasaur, yeah, a level 35 Bulbasaur is not like a high ask for trading. You just evolve it, you put in 10k on it, and it's going to be pretty serviceable.
Yeah, I think if you had an Ivysaur over the Shiftry, that would make a big difference.
Okay.
Because then you go from basically tying against Bulbasaurs and Ivysaurs versus Shiftry loses.
Let's see.
Also, on the subject of having people to practice with, have you used the trainer code channel on the Discord server?
I have. I just joined the server recently, so I
Okay,
just
cool.
started
Well,
working on those.
awesome. And then the other thing you can do, if you want, is you can join one of the remote tournament lobbies, which are great ways to get a lot of practice. And we run like Silph Arena ranked tournaments, and then you can also just like scrim against those people too. It's something that I definitely suggest, because it's a good way to just get in a lot more reps.
I am looking at the Bulbasaurs I have. Actually, I think I have one I could get ready. It actually has pretty good IVs looking at it. I'm evolving it now. I'll read the IVs once it finishes. But it was caught at level 33.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, level 33, 5 attack, 15 defense, 14 HP. And how much would it be? $36.
Yeah, so there's some budget restrictions, but another decent resource, JRE Seawolf, I think his tag on Reddit is JRE47. He posts a monthly Nifty or Thrifty post, so got some good information on how to save some dust if you want some
Alright.
good close to
And
meta
another
or
thing
off-meta
is,
options.
is Altaria an option for you?
No, there's one I have that I could power up, but that would cost around 60k, and right now I still need to get around 10 or 50, well, maybe around 20k to get the Ivysaur ready.
Okay, we'll go for the Ivysaur, but like, if you see any like wild Swablues between now and when your tournament is, I would say check them, and maybe you'll get lucky and find one that evolves pretty close to 1500, and then you could try dropping Altari in place of the Mantine.
Okay.
All right, I think we should probably move to the next team.
All right, appreciate the help.
So the next team, yeah, no problem. Thanks for tuning in. The next team is Muffin, and he's got a team that we've basically been reviewing. It's basically the standard Zoo, Skarmory, Haunter, Venusaur, Bastiodon, and Medicham. So we've kind of been doing this review. He did have one question, is swapping Bastiodon for Melmetal to threaten Azu and Skarmory cores a little bit more.
I
and
think
he's
it's
seeing a lot of
definitely.
lanterns. So he's just wondering what's the best line of attack against a lantern.
All right.
He's
well,
also
so
got Sludge Bomb Haunter.
okay. Well, I think switching to Melmetal is definitely a good consideration, because it does threaten those cores like we talked about, and it does make him a little bit stronger against a Gallade. In terms of attacking Lantern, I would say one big thing to note is check the IVs of your Haunter, and run some sims on PvPoke with it, because some higher defense IV Haunters hit a bulk point against Lantern, where the water gun only does 3 damage instead of 4. And this is a pretty big deal because it means that Haunter's able to beat, depending on both the defense IV and the HP IV, Haunter can potentially beat Lantern in the one shield by just double sludge bombing. Or if it's a little bit less, you can still beat it with a Shadow Punch bait and then a sludge bomb. So knowing what those IVs are can kind of allow you to know how to tackle that matchup with Haunter, because Haunter is a decent counter or check for Lantern, and then you obviously also have the Venusaur and the Medicham that can beat it.
Yep. Alright, next team is... well, that's a Nightmare team. Alright, so Kakoi J has a Sableye with a Foul Play and Power Gem. He's got Gallade, Bastiodon, Skarmory, Medicham, and Azumarill. So pretty standard on those 4, and then he's got Gallade and Sableye. Isn't this the same team that Mason used, except Bastiodon instead of Melmetal?
Well, and Mason used Haunter instead of Sableye.
Yeah. Haunter instead of Sableye, you're right.
But yeah, I think this is a pretty strong, generally meta team. I don't think there's too many holes with it, really.
It's not perfect, and you also need some predictive power in deciding, what the opponent's lead is going to be. Watch out! Don't get overconfident with Skarmory or Sableye when you have an opposing Haunter, because if it has Shadow Ball, it can still put a huge dent in both of them. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I see that this team would be weak against... Sorry, just jumped on.
No, we warned them about you.
Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, the first thing that I saw was that Lantern and Azumarill. So even if because you don't have a strong grass type like Venusaur, Gallade can probably get off 2 Leaf Blade and it's gone. So if someone plays Azumarill and Lantern in the same line, which can very much happen, I think, a lot of the time you'll struggle with that. I think you'll struggle because if they try to get rid of the Gallade, both of those two are very strong against the rest of the team.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think Venusaur.
Have you seen very? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Venusaur is like a much more potent grass type, and because it doesn't have electric, so it makes the Azumarill like Lantern pair a lot stronger.
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot of Lantern, so that's why.
So then I guess
And
you're
you have Lantern.
suggesting either swapping Gallade to Venusaur or maybe Bastiodon to Melmetal then, Blandon?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that, because if you've got the Gallade and the Sableye and the Azumarill, so you don't have to. You got so much coverage for the Melmetal against the Medicham. Yeah, so I think Tristan's right. Like I would suggest that as well, Venusaur or the Melmetal.
AJ, were you gonna say something else?
No, not necessarily. I hadn't considered so much the Azumarill Lantern threat, but you're right. If you lacking the grass, it is not so risky to bring both of them together.
Yeah, there was one team, and you saw. I think it's trainer AJG. He bought the triple water Pokemon, and it made a lot of sense. If there's not like potent grass, so you bring 2 water, and we've seen that in Tempest. You double up on something like double electric, like it works, right?
What are you accusing me of? What did I do?
Sorry, trainer 8. Is that 8? Like, no, I'm not accusing you. There was a guy that was.
I'm joking, man.
Yeah, the regionals. There was a guy. His name was Trainer AJ, and his team was quite interesting. I mean, a couple of mistakes that everyone talked about, but he's pretty solid in most of his games.
Right, and he ran what, Azumarill, Lantern, and Cash. Was that right?
That's right. Triple water. Yep. Yeah, and I see the logic in that. You will see that Lantern Azumarill, if they don't have enough grass answer or electric, then it's very, very potent.
That's interesting.
But if they do, you run into some trouble.
Who ran into some trouble?
No, I'm saying that if you do have triple water like that, then of course you're going to run into trouble against those Venusaur teams. So there's definitely trade-offs there.
Yeah, actually, I got to go back to the Reddit post and sort of he did talk about how he handled against that.
All right, so we got a kind of a similar team. Still has the solid Medicham, Azumarill, Skarmory, and this is Daigarcha. Instead of Bastiodon, he's got Melmetal. Instead of Gallade, he's got Venusaur. Instead of Sableye, he's got Haunter.
And he says, "I know I'm weak to." He said, "I know I'm weak to Melmetal and Gallade."
Melmetal does good against Gallade, and so does Skarmory. And Medicham has the 2 shields.
So it's not terribly weak to Gallade. And then for Melmetal, let's see, he has the Mirror and he has Medicham. So that is a little soft to Melmetal, huh?
Yeah.
But the one thing with
I'd be more
Melmetal
comfortable if it was a Shadow Ball Hunter.
Yeah. But I mean, the one thing with Melmetal is that it isn't like that tanky. So even though, you know, Azumarill and Azumarill has Hydro Pump too, so that can definitely dent it. But you know, even though your Venusaur and Haunter and Azu and Skarmory are all losing to Melmetal, they can all put like a decent chunk of damage into it before they go down. So I'm not sure that Melmetal is necessarily going to run through 2 Pokemon in the same way that Bastiodon could.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think this team's pretty solid.
I think so too. And I've said this before, I don't think the Melmetal weakness, you know, within quotes, is a deal breaker. It is something to work around. So if you're expecting a Melmetal from the other guy, you can work around that. You know, you could use that to your advantage. I don't think it's a deal breaker.
Alright, so let's move on to the next team then, which is Mystic Styles 1. They're running Azumarill with Hydro Pump and Play Rough. They're running Gallade. They're running Bastiodon. They're running Skarmory. They're running Medicham, and they're running Venusaur.
Medicham is a threat. The 2 shields Medicham threat for this team.
Yeah.
Basically, he's doubling up on the grass coverage with Gallade and Venusaur, since they have similar roles. They're not identical. They have similar roles. And because of those two together, you could potentially run into a Skarmory problem. Although you do have Azumarill and Bastiodon to cover it in the mirror, of course. I'm not totally sold on Venusaur and Gallade together. What do you think?
I agree. I think maybe dropping one of them in favor of a grass type, or not grass, in favor of a ghost type rather, whether that be Haunter or Sableye, might be a little more balanced. I think that's kind of like, as we've been going through these last few teams and we're like, that's a meta team, that's a meta team. It seems like the general format is like Bastiodon or Melmetal, and then Venusaur or Gallade, or even Tropius maybe if you want, and then Skarmory, Azumarill, Medicham, and then Haunter or Sableye. That seems to be kind of the general standard meta team right now. And I think that's kind of for good reason, because you want one of those ghosts to help have a better Medicham matchup. Because like you said, that 2-shield Medicham can be a pretty big problem.
And so the next team we have is DRSP. He's got Kanto Raichu, Gallade, Skarmory, Medicham, Azumarill, and Bastiodon. So again, sort of this meta structure, you know, archetype that we've been preaching about. However, he doesn't have any really good responses to 2-shield Medicham.
Right,
normally,
yeah, it's a similar problem as the last one.
Yes. Normally, that slot that Kanto Raichu's in, that's where like Haunter or Sableye would be. But because it's filling that slot, you're now suddenly open to Medicham being able to beat this team with 2 shields, unless you get in the mirror.
Right, so I guess one thing that could apply to both this team and the last one is if they were really attached to the 6 they have, they could swap. Oh, actually, I just realized the last team, Azu was running. Wait, I don't know. But if they ran Ice Beam Play Rough Azumarill, that would help them with their 2-shield Medicham matchup, while allowing them to run the same 6 they have listed.
The role of the Raichu, Alolan, and Bastiodon is quite similar, would you not say? They're both just to get rid of the flyers, and they're meant to block Azumarill.
Right, but the Kanto Raichu has Brick Break, which gives it, I think, some decent matchups with like Melmetal and Bastiodon. But I agree, there's definitely some overlap there. But the Raichu has a better Azumarill matchup than the Bastiodon. AJ, what do you think?
So swapping Raichu for what?
Oh, well, we were just talking about the differences between Raichu, or kind of the potential somewhat overlap between Raichu and Bastiodon. But just kind of what do you think of the team in general, I guess?
I'm not comfortable with the Raichu in that slot, given that you already have Bastiodon and Azumarill with the current set. You already are almost, you're fine with Skarmory, I think. I don't see what Raichu is doing that the rest of the team isn't already picking up for in coverage-wise.
Well, and they have Skarmory Mirror too. I'm assuming they're just trying to scare off Skarmory so that they can use Gallade. But
I mean, if Skarmory is your only counter to Gallade, you wouldn't not bring it. You would just be wary of leading it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, anyway, I think we can move on to the next one if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Rizachi is running Whiscash, standard set, Azumarill with Pump and Play Rough, a Melmetal with the standard set, Skarmory, Venusaur, and Medicham. So pretty much all standard move sets. He feels like he's a little too vulnerable to Sableye, and he's scared that the team only has 2 counters to Medicham. So should I swap one of them for Ghost? Maybe Whiscash is what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, if he's feeling weak to Sableye and Medicham, then swapping Whiscash out for his own Sableye would probably be the best way to cover that.
Do you think he's weak to Sableye, though? He got Skarmory, Venusaur, Azumarill?
Not really. And I think I'm not familiar with like the Whisk and Melmetal matchups, but I don't think Whiscash and Melmetal have that bad of Sableye matchups either. But
yeah,
being the weakness to Medicham is definitely a little bit more of a concern.
Take a risky lead.
Yeah, so maybe swapping out that Whiscash for either a Haunter or a Sableye, and that brings you back to that kind of core meta 6 that we keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with running it this way, but it is a little weak to Medicham, like they noted.
Yeah, I agree. I think
okay.
Medicham is a bigger threat than Sableye.
And they're asking us, they said they have access to Sableye, Haunter, and Banette, and are asking which would be the best choice in place of that Whiscash.
I mean, I really like Haunter. I'm a little biased towards it. And Banette, I've heard a little bit about it, and like it's okay. Sableye is probably one of the safer choices. I honestly think, all of things considered, Medicham being what it is, Haunter would be a better replacement. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do really like Haunter. Like we said, I think the rest of the team is set up pretty well to deal with the Sableye. So I think it's okay if you run a Haunter, even though that's weak to Sableye. But I think, I mean, both deal with Medicham quite well. And then I think Haunter picks up better coverage against like Azumarill and grass types, whereas Sableye picks up that Haunter and Gallade coverage. So it's a little bit of what you'd rather have a little better coverage to, and what you'd rather be a little weaker to. And that's kind of preference.
Alright. Fallen 117. He's running Bastiodon, an interesting team actually. Bastiodon, Medicham, Lugia. He's got extra sensory on it. Azumarill with Play Rough, Ice Beam, Venusaur, and Whiscash. So he's thinking of switching Whiscash for a non-legacy Haunter, and he also has a legacy Raichu. He's thinking about using it. But if you're running Lugia already, it seems like Haunter wouldn't be the switch to make, because Whiscash offers some sort of interesting coverage, and Lugia sort of puts a band-aid on some of the Haunter coverage that you would otherwise be lacking.
Right. It seems like, yeah, it just seems like Haunter and Lugia are a little bit doubling up on that anti-Medicham role. So, I think this is this the team that Caleb used, or pretty close to it?
I don't remember Caleb's team, but
I know for sure he had Lugia and Whiscash, though. So if it wasn't his team, it's got to be pretty close.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's a solid team as is. If you wanted to run Haunter, maybe you drop the Lugia Whiscash combo and bring in like Skarmory and Haunter, perhaps.
Yeah.
If they wanted to use the Raichu, that could probably slot into that Whiscash slot.
Ooh, you think so?
Well,
I don't know where I'd put Raichu.
Well, I'm just wondering because right now, Skarmory, so Azu has Play Rough Ice Beam, which means Skarmory can tie it in the one shield. Skarmory's a check to Medicham, beats Lugia, and beats Venu. So maybe swapping Whiscash to Raichu to help deter that Skarmory.
Maybe. Yeah. The only difference between a Wrangler just sent us a message, and the only difference between this team and Caleb's is Ice Beam on Azumarill.
Right, so I mean, Caleb made it work. It's got some battle testing for sure. So you could definitely run it as is, or play around with those swaps. I don't know if the Raichu in for Whiscash is definitely the right play, but it seems to me like that would be the thing that I would drop if I was going to run the Raichu. I'm not sure I'd really drop anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I still think it's a solid team. I mean, there's definitely some things to work around, and I guess more and more people are more familiar with Lugia matchups now, but it's not as nearly as common as Skarmory. So it's interesting. Well, Tristan, we went on 2 hours. We have
Oh,
one,
jeez,
two,
I didn't
three.
know.
Yeah, we have 4 more submissions.
All right, let's just
Do you want
power
to
through these
power
real
through
quick.
those?
Yeah, let's power through them.
Alright,
We're
so
almost done.
I'm going to make a little mark here. Any submissions after my mark will not be checked today.
Oh, and Caleb tuned in that that was correct about his team. And Wrangler also noted that he felt like the Whiscash Lugia synergy was pretty important for that 6. So
yeah, I agree.
Maybe it's better to keep it as is. All right, so we're on GBOF Church's team. They have.
He posted his movesets below. I don't know if you see them.
All right, do you want to read it off then?
Sure, it's Tentacruel with Poison Jab, Acid Spray, Hydro Pump, Whiscash, Standard Set, Skarmory, Medicham, Venusaur, and Azumarill. Azumarill is Ice Beam and Play Rough. I haven't played around with Tentacruel that much in this meta. I think Acid Spray is like interesting, but it's like you can definitely work around it. It really is a bad time for Azumarill though to be paired up against Tentacruel.
The biggest thing though that I see right off the get-go is that running Skarmory against this team is pretty appealing. I think I saw this earlier for a similar team that was lacking a dedicated Skarmory counter, and I would probably just, like I said, gamble on my lead and then use Skarmory as a safe switch. Because he doesn't really have a good answer to Skarmory.
It almost seems like Venusaur is like a solid option for Azumarill. So like then you also bring in Tentacruel. It seems like it's a bit overkill. I suppose Tentacruel gives you some situations where it's good against Medicham, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right, because it does resist all its moves.
Yeah. And Acid Spray is kind of like a neat curveball. But I'm not so sure that Triple Waters plus Skarmory is, or it's just Triple Skarmory, I mean Triple Water, period, is going to work out so great for you, given those 3, you know? If it was like Lantern, then maybe, because you're sort of adding that Bastiodon coverage that goes up well against Skarmory. But because you're putting Tentacruel, that matchup is a little bit more iffy.
One also, Lantern gives you that Skarmory coverage, which this team has none of.
So yeah, so what I meant was like normally Bastiodon would be in that slot. But you have Tentacruel. But if you had Lantern instead of Tentacruel, at least you could cover Bastiodon and Skarmory. Versus now it's like kind of iffy.
Yeah.
And you'd still cover Azumarill. So I think arguably Lantern would be a strict upgrade to this team.
Right, I agree with that. The only problem is if they drop, I think they're seeing Tentacruel as like a Medicham counter here. If they swapped Tentacruel out for Lantern, I think they get a bit weak to Medicham then.
Just a quick question. Did you see his question about whether to use Water Gun or Charge Beam?
I'm actually, I'm reading it right now.
Okay.
Water Gun does so much good neutral damage that it's worth, generally speaking, the sacrifice of the energy gain that Charge Beam otherwise gives you. That said, Charge Beam will win the mirror, whereas Water Gun will lose. So
right, but the biggest
trade-off.
I just don't think it's worth it because Water Gun lets you beat Bastiodon for sure in the no shields and the 2 shields, whereas you lose with Charge Beam. And Water Gun beats Bastiodon with a bait in the 1 shield. And if you don't get the bait, I think you're losing by like 9 HP or something. Whereas with Charge Beam,
Right.
you just flat out lose. And the other thing to consider is that Water Gun, depending on the Haunter's IVs, either beats Haunter or narrowly loses, whereas Charge Beam isn't so pretty, and Haunter, I think, beats Charge Beam pretty handily. So,
Yeah. And
and I'll-
another note on this team is because you're running Skarmory, Whiscash together. Well, I'm just not so sure you're covered with against a Haunter, right? Wouldn't you be really reliant on Whiscash being paired up against Haunter? in this
yeah,
case?
especially if it was a Shadow Ball Haunter, I think Whiscash is really the only answer to
Yeah.
it.
And Church is on our stream. I think he's been on our Discord for a little while, but he just joined today. So, welcome. Thanks for your submission, man.
But yeah, I
All
think
right.
the triple water is a problem, and then the lack of a Skarmory counter is a problem, and then it's maybe a little soft to Metacham, so you might just have to kind of play around with those slots,
Yeah.
and you might need to make like 2 changes in order to get a Skarmory counter in and a better Metacham counter in. Kind of a deal.
Even swapping Lugia for Skarmory and then maybe Lantern for Tentacruel would be 2 really kind of good options.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Alright, next team.
Holden McGroin's got Venusaur, Mantine, Skarmory, Bastiodon, Metacham, Lantern. We don't have movesets, so we're assuming standard movesets. I don't know how much Mantine and Skarmory is really helping you here. It's like a lot of overlapping coverage.
I also just wonder why no. Because Azumarill has, like, definitely some overlapping coverage and weaknesses with the Mantine, but is kind of generally a better pick. Like, there's a reason that I think every team up until this one has had an Azumarill in it.
Yeah. Have you seen a winning team, like a tournament winning team, without Azumarill? I haven't.
Okay, they said they were thinking of switching Bastiodon for Azumarill.
Why not Mantine for Azumarill?
They're typing. Let's see what they have to say. They say Mantine does well against a lot of the off-meta picks like Haunter. Doesn't Bastiodon also do well against a lot of the off-meta picks? And Metacham. Well, Azumarill does well against Metacham. Alright, well, they say they're still testing.
I'd be very interested to see if after those tests, you still feel like you don't miss Azumarill, like for Mantine or something like that. Because I'd miss it. I use it all the time. I mean, I've run sets of scrims with one team against the other, and out of 10 times, the other guy might use Azumarill 7. So you just you never know how much Azumarill will be like a good linchpin in your team that doesn't require a lot of shields to do a good job.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's definitely like you could be justified in dropping Azumarill, but it seems like you have to have like a really good reason and a really specific, well thought out team composition to make up for that. And I don't know, this just feels a little bit like haphazardly dropping Azumarill in favor of Mantine.
Yeah. All right.
I also
does he have any
just
other
last
questions?
he said thanks for the advice. And the other concern with this team, I mean, granted, I'm not familiar with the Mantine matchups, but it seems like we kind of brought this up a few times that the double shielded Medicham could cause some problems here.
For sure.
Because I'm going to guess that Mantine loses that against Medicham, and he has no Ice Beam Azumarill and no like Haunter or Sableye or anything like that.
Yeah.
He said from his testing over 100 practice matches, a lot of people shield against me. I mean, sure, I guess it's good at baiting shields, but I mean, you could also bait a lot of shields running Haunter or Sableye, which would give you a better Medicham counter that can also draw shields. And I don't know, people shield a decent amount against Azumarill too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I think the bottom line is if you're gonna choose something that's off meta, you better have like a really good reason for it. And so like, you know, the general tendency is that we're gonna recommend meta options. And then like if you have a good strategy pushback, then we sort of back off from that. But it just sounds like there's too much overlap. Mantine and Skarmory coverage. Mantine isn't doing so much for your team that it justifies dropping Azum. Big Boned 33 has Alolan Graveler, Azumarill, Skarmory, Lantern, Skuntank, and Medicham. I don't know. Skuntank, I'm not convinced in this meta at all.
Me neither. It just the main appeal, because I've used, well, I guess it wasn't Skuntank, but I used Alolan Muck in Freestyle, which is obviously pretty similar but a little different. And the main reason I did that is because Alolan Muck with Poison Jab is a Azumarill counter that's also able to counter like Cresselia, Hypno, Defense Deoxys, Mew. But when you take those psychic types out of the picture, I just don't think that the dark poisons cover that much anymore. Especially because you're either running Poison Jab so that you can counter Azumarill and grass types, or you're running Bite, which isn't that great, but you're running Bite to counter like Haunter and Sableye. But it doesn't really work both ways because Azumarill resists Bite and the ghost types resist poison. So it's not like it can really counter both. It's like you're speccing it one way or the other, and I don't think either single coverage is enough. Whereas, like, if you wanted to cover Sableye and Haunter, then you're probably better off looking at Sableye or even like Umbreon as a dark type. And if you want to cover Azumarill, then you're probably better off looking at, I don't know, Venusaur or even like Poison Jab Toxicroak, or like there's other options that I feel like are better.
Yeah, Medicham is going to give this team a lot of grief. Like a lot.
I agree. Also, Whiscash is going to give it some trouble too. With the double weak Alolan Graveler and the Lantern and Skuntank that are weak to it too.
Yeah, I agree. Alright. GBO. Okay, Church already posted. So this is our last team of the evening. got Bastiodon, Medicham, Whiscash, Skarmory, Azumarill with Hydro Pump Play Rough, and then Tropius with Air Slash. So, we kind of mentioned this before. The trade-offs Tropius and Skarmory, or the trade-off Tropius with Air Slash versus Razor Leaf, it becomes a little bit of a pseudo Skarmory role with some grass coverage, which is cool. I'm not convinced by it. I know it's worked for some people, but if you're gonna run Tropius and Skarmory together, you're having a lot of overlap in matchups. So I don't know that that's doing you any favors, other than people will not be expecting Air Slash from Tropius if you already have Skarmory on your team. What do you think?
I mean, I kind of agree. I mean, I've seen some people talk about it. Like, there's some merit to it. Like, it flips the Venusaur matchup. It gives you, I think, a little bit of a better, like, Medicham matchup. It gives you I think Tropius already beats Gallade, but it gives you an even better Gallade matchup. On the flip side, if you're going up against like an Ice Beam Azumarill, then your matchup gets really iffy then, and your Mudboy matchups get iffier too. And while Razor Leaf Tropius loses to Bastiodon, it still can dent it, but Air Slash, I think, like, doesn't really do much of anything against Bastiodon. So
yeah,
I mean, there's definitely trade-offs. In my opinion, it seems like the trade-offs are worth it. But I mean, there's some merit to it. I just don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah. This team is really stacked against Venusaur. Like, a Venusaur would have a lot of trouble with this team because of Tropius. Like, you're basically baiting it out, right? Because you'd think, you'd be using Venusaur because it's got Bastiodon, it's a decent Medicham matchup, Whiscash and Azumarill. But then, like, you play your cards right, and you got your Skarmory and then your Tropius or whatever. Then he's suddenly running into a lot of issues with his Venusaur. But that's like a one-trick pony, Like, once that card is played, then they just have to readjust. So. Do you have anything else you want to add, Tristan?
I'm just trying to think about this. I mean, I think again. Well, I mean, I'm not familiar with Air Slash Tropius matchups, but again, I think it might struggle a little bit with that double shielded Medicham that we keep coming back to.
For sure.
And I'm just trying to think what else they're sacrificing, because they're running Whiscash, which hasn't been in that main 6 that a lot of people are running. And then they're running their Tropius as Air Slash. So I'm just trying to think what else they're sacrificing.
Well, they're sacrificing something that walls Medicham.
Right. I guess they're hoping to just, like, throw a lot of checks at it. Like, they have the Mirror, they have Skarm, they have Air Slash Tropius, and they have Azumarill. So I guess instead of walling Medicham, they're hoping to just kind of check it. Which I guess could work. I don't know. I'm not too keen on this team, but I mean, it's not like terribly out of line. Like, I think they could definitely do well with it. I'm just not sold myself. I wouldn't run this, but if I saw this team rattle off some wins, I wouldn't be that shocked either.
I agree. No, I agree with that. All right. Well, that's all our teams for the evening. We went a little bit past what we thought we were gonna go, but
Just a little
at
bit.
least we
Just a
got them
little
all
bit.
done.
Sorry about that,
At
Quartz.
least
No,
we
well,
got them all done.
You guys were doing a
before
lot
the
of the heavy
weekend,
lifting too.
and
So yeah,
then-
thanks to Tristan and AJ as well. Good stream today, by the way, guys. Yeah, good luck with everyone's regional tournaments.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in and submitting teams.
Yeah, we had a
Thanks
very
to
last
Bland.
minute request on team submissions, and a lot of people came
Go
through.
on, what was that? A last minute request?
Oh no, you had like when you put up the announcement on team reviews, we had so many
Oh,
people
yeah.
submitting at the last minute, which gave us content.
Yeah, we went from like two team
teams,
submissions,
yeah.
I think an hour and a half before the stream, to like 20 teams or something. And yeah, thanks to Blandon for joining us for a bit. And also thanks to who was it that subscribed today, Quartz?
We had Perseus Demos subscribing today,
Yeah, so thank you to them
and a lot of
for
new
being
followers
our.
as well. So all in all, a great stream today, guys. Hopefully, you guys learned something today. And this video will be up on YouTube later tonight, and you can go back and watch whichever part you feel like applies to your team the most. The last minute question about Dusclops, but I think do you guys want to say anything about Dusclops?
AJ?
Dusclops.
Yeah.
I can say that I have a lucky one with a second move unlocked that I have. Here's the thing. Dusclops is interesting with its fire punch coverage or ice punch, and there's some uncertainty in what charge moves it's going to run. Hex is just not a very good move.
Yeah, compared
It
to
really
Shadow
isn't.
Claw,
I
right?
see Dusclops. Yeah, I see Dusclops as like a C tier option compared to like Sableye and Haunter.
Yeah.
I'll take that with a grain of salt because I'm very partial to Haunter. It's one of my favorites, and I really enjoy using it, especially the Shadow Ball Legacy variant. I put a lot of resources into trading for one. I'm not sold on Dusclops other than as a good like draft tournament pick.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to end the stream. So yeah, I don't know when our next stream is going to be, but probably going to be covering the new cup, because I'm assuming that it'll be coming up soon, right?
Very soon.
Very soon. We might do more Nightmare team reviews next week as well. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a good night.